The sun was burning above the alien marketplace, its light cutting through the dusty air. Hundreds of cages lined the stone streets, each filled with frightened faces. Some were men, some women, many children, all waiting to be sold like objects. The smell of fear mixed with the smell of sweat and smoke. It was a place where dignity was stripped away and hope rarely survived. In the middle of this cruel place stood a little alien girl. Her hair was messy, her clothes torn, but her eyes still shined with determination. She held the bars of her mother's cage and cried out to the crowd. Her voice shook as she shouted, "Please, please make a bid for my mom. She will cook you delicious meals. She can work hard. She can be useful. Please do not let them take her away." The mother sat inside the cage, her head lowered. She was thin and weak, her face pale from hunger and exhaustion. She had once been proud, but now shame and despair weighed her down. She whispered, "Stop, my child. No one will listen." Yet the girl refused to stop. Her little voice rose again, desperate. "She is kind. She can cook better than anyone. She will make you happy. Please, someone, take her." But the crowd laughed. Some shook their heads. Some mocked her. One alien merchant sneered, "Who would want a useless widow? She has no value. Let them rot." Others passed by without even looking, their eyes cold, their hearts harder than stone. The little girl's voice cracked. She looked at her mother, tears running down her cheeks. "Mama, I will not give up. Someone will help us. I know it." Her small hands trembled as she gripped the bars tighter. Hope burned in her even as the world spat on it. Then, from the edge of the marketplace, footsteps echoed. A figure moved slowly through the crowd. It was a human, tall, broad-shouldered, his clothes dusty from travel. Unlike the others, his eyes did not look with greed or cruelty. His gaze was calm, searching, almost kind. The merchants frowned. Humans rarely came here, and when they did, it was not to buy slaves. The human walked closer, stopping before the cage. His eyes studied the mother, then the girl. He said nothing at first. The silence made the merchants impatient. "Well, do you want her or not?" one barked. The little girl pressed her face to the bars, looking up at him. "Please, sir, please bid for my mom. She will cook for you. She will not complain. She just needs a chance. Please don't let them take her away." The human lowered himself slightly, meeting her eyes. There was no laughter in his face, no cruelty, only a quiet strength. He placed one hand on the cage bars and said in a steady voice, "I'll make a bid." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The merchants burst into laughter. "A human, you? Do you know what you're doing?" One shouted. Another shook his head. "She's worthless. You're wasting your money." Yet the human did not flinch. His voice grew firmer. "I said I'll make a bid." The little girl's mouth fell open. For a moment she could not breathe. Her hands reached out as if to touch him. You mean it?" she whispered. Her tears turned from sorrow to disbelief. The mother, still sitting in the cage, lifted her head slowly, her tired eyes locked on the human's face. She wanted to speak, to tell him not to waste his effort, but no words came. Something in his eyes made her pause, something steady, something she had not seen in years. Honor, the merchants grumbled. But business was business. "A fine human, pay the price and take your new pet," one spat. They laughed among themselves, sure that he would regret this decision. As the human handed over the payment, the girl pressed, her hands to her chest, her heart pounding. The cage creaked open and the mother stepped out, unsteady on her feet. The girl rushed forward, hugging her mother tightly. "See, Mama, I told you someone would help us, I told you." The human stood quietly watching them. He gave no speeches, no grand gestures. He simply extended his hand. "You're free now. Come with me." The mother hesitated, but the girl tugged her hand. "Mama, let's go. Let's trust him." The crowd muttered, some angry, some amused. None could understand why a human would choose to buy what everyone else rejected. But the human did not look back. He turned and walked away, the widow and her daughter following close behind. For the first time in years, the little girl smiled with hope. Her voice, soft but certain, whispered, "We are saved, Mama. We are saved." And though the mother said nothing, Deep inside, her heart stirred with a warmth she thought she had lost forever. The marketplace noise faded as the human walked away with the widow and her daughter. Behind them, the merchants still laughed. Their mocking voices carried through the air. "He bought a broken widow," one jeered. "Humans are fools, always wasting themselves on hopeless causes," another added. But the human did not turn back. His steps were steady, each one taking them further from the cruelty of the cages. The little girl clung to his arm, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, sir, thank you for saving my mom," she whispered again and again. Her voice trembled, but now it was trembling with joy. The human gave a small nod. He said little, but his silence carried weight. The widow walked a few steps behind. Her body was weak, her face pale, her mind swirled with doubt and fear. She whispered to herself, Why would he do this? For years she had seen how others treated her kind. To them she was nothing. She could not understand why a human, a stranger, would spend his own money to buy her freedom. As they reached the edge of the marketplace, the human paused. He turned. To them his eyes were calm. "My name is Daniel," he said simply. The girl blinked, then gave a shy smile. "I'm Lyra," she said, clutching her mother's hand. The mother hesitated before whispering, "My name is Soraya." Her voice was quiet, filled with unease. Daniel gave a small nod and began walking again. The streets around the marketplace grew cleaner as they moved away, but whispers followed them. People on the streets looked with suspicion. Some pointed at Soraya and Lyra. Some whispered cruel jokes. "Look, a human bought himself alien baggage. What a fool, she'll drag him down." The little girl pressed closer to Daniel. "Why are they saying that?" she asked softly. Daniel looked down at her and answered, "Because they don't understand." His voice was calm, but inside his chest, anger burned at their cruelty. They reached a small wagon parked outside the marketplace. Daniel helped Soraya climb in. Her legs shook, and she almost fell, but he caught her arm and steadied her. She flinched at his touch, unused to kindness. "You're safe now," he said quietly. She looked at him with confused eyes, unable to reply. The wagon moved along the road leading to the town's edge. The ride was silent except for the sound of the wheels. Lyra sat close to her mother, whispering about how things would change now. "Mama, he's kind. I know it. Maybe he will let us stay with him. Maybe we won't have to be afraid anymore." Soraya tried to smile, but doubt clouded her heart, she thought. "No one helps without reason. What does this man want from us?" When they reached Daniel's home, a modest stone house near the forest, Lyra's eyes widened. To her, it looked like a castle compared to the cages. Daniel stepped down and helped them inside. The room smelled of wood and fire, not filth and dust. "Rest here," Daniel said, pulling out 2 chairs. Soraya sat slowly, her back still stiff. Lyra sat beside her, eyes darting around with wonder. Daniel poured them cups of water and placed bread on the table. Lyra reached eagerly, biting into the bread. Her eyes lit up. "Mama, it's soft, it's warm." Soraya took her piece slowly. Her hands shook as she lifted it. She had not eaten bread this fresh in years. Tears burned her eyes as she chewed, not because of the taste, but because of the simple kindness behind it. But doubt still gnawed at her. She looked at Daniel and whispered, "Why did you buy us? Everyone says I'm worthless. You could have walked away. Why?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. His voice was steady. "Because no one is worthless. Not you. Not her." He glanced at Lyra, who was smiling through her crumbs. "You deserve to live free. That's reason enough." Soraya's breath caught in her chest. Her heart wanted to believe him, but fear whispered otherwise. Humans don't risk themselves for aliens, she thought. This must be a trick. He must want something later. That night, Soraya could not sleep. She sat awake in the corner of the small room Daniel had given them. Lyra slept soundly on a soft blanket, dreaming peacefully for the first time in years. Soraya, however, kept glancing at Daniel through the doorway. He was sitting at the table, sharpening a knife, not for threat, but for his own work. The firelight flickered across his face, calm and focused. Soraya whispered to herself, Why are you helping us? What are you hiding? But deep inside, a voice she had long buried stirred. A voice that said, maybe, just maybe, this man was different. The merchant's mocking words echoed in her head. You bought a broken widow. They believed she was useless, that she had no value left. But Daniel's actions were beginning to plant a dangerous seed inside her. Hope. And hope was something Soraya had almost forgotten how to feel. Daniel's house stood quietly at the edge of the forest, far from the noise and cruelty of the market. It was not a palace, not even a grand home, but compared to the cages, it was a world of safety. The walls were made of stone, the roof strong against wind and rain. A small fire burned in the hearth, giving the room warmth and comfort. Lyra's eyes shined as she stepped inside. She ran her small hands across the wooden table, across the walls, and whispered with awe, Mama, it's so clean. It's so warm. To her, it was like stepping into another life. A dream she never thought possible. Soraya followed more slowly. Her feet were hesitant. Her hands clutched the edge of her ragged shawl. She could not let her guard down. This is not ours, she thought. He will soon demand something in return. No one gives without taking. She sat on the chair Daniel pulled out for her. Her eyes fixed on the floor, Daniel moved about the room quietly. He placed a small loaf of bread and some cheese on the table. He filled cups with water and pushed them gently toward the mother. And child, he spoke little, his voice calm when he did. Eat, you need strength. Lyra ate happily. Crumbs sticking to her lips, she giggled softly and said, Mama, it's good, it's so good. Soraya ate as well, but every bite was heavy. Her body accepted the food, but her heart carried suspicion. She glanced at Daniel, who sat across from them, eating in silence. When the meal was done, Daniel spoke again. There is a small room in the back, you can sleep there tonight. Lyra's face lit up. A bed? Mama, do you hear? A bed. She jumped up and pulled her mother's hand. Come see. The small room was plain, only a simple bed and a blanket, but to Lyra it was treasure. She threw herself on the blanket and laughed. Her laughter was so pure, so full of joy. It made even Daniel's stern face soften. Soraya sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at her daughter with gentle eyes, but her heart was heavy. Do not get too happy, child. This is not our home, she thought. We are still strangers here. The next morning, Soraya rose early. She walked into the kitchen and found Daniel already awake. He was cutting wood, his movements strong and steady. She watched silently before whispering, What do you want from us? Daniel looked at her, confusion in his eyes. Nothing, he replied. You needed help, so I helped. His words sounded simple, but to Soraya they were impossible. She clenched her hands. No, people do not help for nothing. There must be something. Later that day, neighbors came. They stood at the fence whispering to each other, their eyes full of suspicion and anger. One shouted, Why is there alien trash in your house, human? Send them away before they bring trouble. Another spat on the ground. She's not worth the bread you're giving her. Daniel walked outside. His voice was firm. They are under my roof now. They will not be harmed. The neighbors muttered threats. But Daniel's steady gaze forced them to leave. Inside, Soraya trembled. She had heard their words. She felt shame and fear. She whispered to herself, See, we are nothing but a burden. He will regret taking us. But when Daniel entered, he simply said, Don't listen to them. They do not matter. Days passed, Soraya remained distant. She cleaned quietly, cooked small meals, but she avoided speaking too much. Her heart built walls of caution. Lyra, however, grew brighter each day. She followed Daniel around, asking endless questions. Why do you chop wood this way? Why is the fire so warm? Can I help? Daniel answered with patience, sometimes even smiling at her curiosity. Slowly, the girl brought life into the house, filling it with laughter that had long been absent. But Soraya still kept her distance. At night, when Lyra slept peacefully, Soraya sat by the window staring at the stars. We are strangers here, she whispered. We do not belong. Tomorrow he may send us away. Yet each morning Daniel still set bread on the table. still gave water, still offered safety. He never asked for payment, never raised his voice, never treated them as property. And though Soraya fought against it, a small crack began to form in the walls around her heart. One evening, Lyra hugged Daniel suddenly, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving us a home." Daniel froze for a moment, then gently placed a hand on her head. He did not say much, but his silence carried warmth. Soraya saw this, and her chest ached. A voice whispered inside her. Maybe he truly means it. Maybe he is different. But fear still clung to her like chains. She whispered to herself, "We are still strangers. We cannot trust too quickly." The house grew warmer with each passing day, but Soraya's heart remained caught between doubt and hope, between fear of betrayal and the fragile dream of belonging. And though she told herself again and again that they were only strangers, deep inside she wondered, what if we are not? The nights in Daniel's house were quiet. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the soft rustle of trees outside. For Lyra, these nights were full of peace. She slept deeply, her little body curled under the blanket, her face calm and smiling. It was the first time in years that she dreamed without fear. But for Soraya, the nights were restless. She often sat awake, her eyes scanning the shadows. Every creak of the wood, every howl of the wind made her tense. The kindness of this human confused her. It warmed her heart, but it also filled her with fear. She whispered to herself, if something seems too good, it usually hides danger. Night. As she fetched water from the well near the edge of the woods, Soraya overheard voices. Two figures stood near the trees, whispering in low, sharp tones. She froze, her heart pounding. "Did you hear?" one said. "That human bought a widow and her brat from the market." "Yes," the other sneered. "Foolish man. But he will not keep them long. The slavers are angry. They say she was not his to take." "They'll come for her soon," the first voice added. "She and the child will be dragged back in chains." Soraya's breath caught. Her hands shook so badly the water spilled from the bucket. She pulled herself back quietly, her chest tight. Fear rose in her throat like fire. She ran back to the house, shut the door, and pressed her back against it. Her whole body trembled. Inside, Lyra was still asleep. Daniel sat by the fire sharpening his blade. His eyes lifted as Soraya entered. She looked pale, her breaths uneven. He frowned. "What happened?" Soraya wanted to lie, to say nothing, but the words spilled out. "They are coming, the slavers. They want to take me back. They want to take my daughter. I heard them whispering. They know where we are." Her voice cracked, tears filling. Her eyes, Daniel set the blade down. His expression did not change, but his jaw tightened. He stood, tall and calm. "Then they will find me waiting." Soraya's fear turned to shock. "You do not understand. They will not stop. They will come with many men. You cannot fight them all. You will be killed." Daniel's eyes were steady. "Let them come," he said firmly. "I will not let them take you." Soraya stared at him, unable to speak. Her heart pounded. Her whole life she had known betrayal, cruelty, abandonment. Yet here stood a man who spoke with certainty. A man who was ready to stand between her and the storm. The next day the whispers spread through the village. People avoided Daniel's house, neighbors muttered warnings. The slavers will burn his home. He should have never brought them here. Some even shouted at Daniel as he walked through the street. "Send them back before we all suffer." But Daniel ignored them. He bought supplies quietly, sharpened his tools, and prepared his home for trouble. Soraya watched him, torn between guilt and gratitude. He risks everything for us. Why? Why does he do this? That night, Soraya sat by the fire. She whispered to him, "Why do you protect us? You owe us nothing. You could send us away and be free of danger." Daniel looked into the flames. His voice was low but strong. "Because you deserve more than chains. Because your daughter deserves a future. Because no one should be taken against their will, not while I live. Tears welled in Soraya's eyes. She turned away quickly, ashamed to let him see. A warmth spread through her chest, but fear clung tightly. If he falls because of us, I will never forgive myself, she thought. Later that week, Lyra ran into the house after playing near the fence, her face pale, her small hands gripping her dress. Mama, Mama, I saw men near the trees. They had weapons. Daniel rose instantly, his hand on his knife. He walked to the window and looked out but saw only shadows. He turned to Soraya and Lyra. Stay inside. Lock the doors when I leave. Soraya grabbed his arm. You cannot face them alone. Her voice shook. They will kill you. Daniel looked at her hand on his arm, then at her eyes. I will not run. I will not let them touch you, he said firmly. His voice carried such certainty it silenced her protests. That night Soraya could not sleep. She sat by her daughter's side, listening for every sound. Her heart raced with every gust of wind. Outside, Daniel stood in the shadows of the porch, his blade ready, his eyes scanning the forest. Hours passed, but no attack came. Only whispers. In the dark, only the weight of fear pressing heavy on the house, Soraya sat in silence, her heart torn between terror and something she had not felt in years. Trust. And though danger was close, though shadows circled them, she found herself whispering, if anyone can keep us safe, maybe it's him. The morning after the whispers of danger, the house felt heavy. The air was thick with silence. Outside, Daniel chopped wood with steady movements, his jaw set, his eyes watchful. Inside, Soraya sat by the table, her hands resting on her lap. Her daughter Lyra hummed softly while drawing shapes in the dust on the floor. Soraya's heart was restless. For days, this human had offered them shelter, food, and protection. Yet she had given nothing in return. A voice inside her whispered, do something, show him you are not just a burden. She took a deep breath and stood. When Daniel came inside with the firewood, he found Soraya in the kitchen, her hands busy. Her eyes focused, she was cutting vegetables he had stored, heating water over the fire. Her movements were slow at first, stiff from years of not cooking freely, but soon her hands remembered the rhythm. Daniel set the wood aside. What are you doing? He asked, his voice calm. Soraya did not look up. You have given us food every day, today. Let me cook for you. He said nothing, but he did not stop her. He only watched quietly as the widow worked. Lyra's eyes sparkled as she sniffed the air. Mama, it smells so good, she said. Her small stomach growled with excitement. Soraya smiled softly for the first time in a long while. She stirred the pot, adding herbs and spices with careful hands. This was more than food. This was her way of giving back dignity. The fire crackled. The smell of stew filled the house. For the first time, Daniel sat at his table and waited, not as a protector, not as a master, but simply as a man sharing a home. When Soraya placed the bowl before him, her hands trembled slightly. She said quietly, it is not much, but it is made with care. Daniel took the spoon. He tasted the stew. The flavors were rich, gentle, warm. His eyes softened. He looked at her and said in a voice that carried truth, this is the best meal I've had in years. Soraya froze. Her chest tightened. She lowered her head quickly, afraid he might see the tears rising in her eyes. No one had spoken such words to her in so long. All her life she had been called worthless, weak, unwanted. Now a human spoke to her with respect. Lyra clapped her hands happily. Mama, see, I told you, you're the best cook. She ate with joy, her small laughter filling the room. Daniel finished his bowl and set it down. His eyes met Soraya's again. You are not a burden here, he said firmly. This is your home too. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. Her heart begged her to trust, but fear whispered still. Do not let your guard down. Do not forget the world is cruel. Yet as she looked at Lyra's bright smile, she thought, maybe here it is different. The rest of the day felt lighter. Daniel chopped wood while Lyra played nearby. Soraya cleaned the kitchen, humming softly without realizing. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging. That evening, the neighbors gathered again near the fence, their voices sharp. "Why waste food on them?" one muttered. "They will bring trouble, you'll see." Another spat. Daniel ignored them, his eyes focused on the fire inside the house, the warmth of the meal still in his chest. Inside, Soraya folded blankets, her heart still uneasy but stronger than before. She thought of Daniel's words. "This is your home too." Those words, replayed again and again. A fragile hope began to bloom in her chest. That night, when Lyra curled against her mother under the blanket, she whispered, "Mama, do you think we can stay here forever?" Soraya hesitated. Her hands stroked her daughter's hair gently. "I do not know, little one, but maybe we can." Outside, Daniel stood guard as he always did. The danger of the slavers still hung in the air. Yet in that moment, inside the small stone house, a family was beginning to form, not by blood, not by law, but by choice. And all because of a single meal, cooked with trembling hands but served with love. The night was darker than usual. Clouds covered the moon, and the forest around Daniel's home whispered with the sound of restless leaves. The fire inside the house burned low, casting soft light across the stone walls. Lyra slept peacefully in the small bed, holding her blanket close. Soraya sat near her daughter, her mind heavy with worry. Daniel stood outside on the porch, his eyes fixed on the trees. For days he had known this moment would come. The slavers would not let their loss go. They were men who thrived on cruelty, who believed no one could defy them, and tonight Daniel could feel their presence in the shadows. Then, from the distance, he heard it, the faint crunch of boots on dry leaves, low voices muttering. The sound grew clearer, closer. Daniel tightened his grip on the blade at his side, his body steady, his breath calm. He whispered to himself, "Let them come." The door opened softly behind him. Soraya stepped out, her face pale. "They are here, aren't they?" she whispered. Daniel gave a short nod. "Stay with your daughter, lock the door." But Soraya shook her head. "No, I cannot hide while you face them alone." Her hands trembled, but her eyes carried fire. Before Daniel could reply, shadows broke from the trees. At least 6 men stepped forward, armed with clubs and blades. Their leader, a tall alien with a scar across his cheek, grinned cruelly. "Human," he spat. "You have something that belongs to us. Hand over the widow and the child and we may spare your life." Daniel's voice was steady, firm. "They are not yours. They will never be yours again." The slavers laughed, their voices harsh and mocking. "Do you think you can stand against us alone?" the leader sneered. "You are only one man." Daniel raised his blade, his eyes sharp. "One man is enough," he said with a roar. The slavers rushed forward. The fight exploded in the darkness. Steel clashed, wood cracked. Daniel moved with precision, his blade struck true, his fists met flesh. For every blow he received, he returned too. Blood marked his face, but his stance did not falter. Inside the house, Lyra woke with a cry. Soraya pulled her close, her heart hammered as she heard the chaos outside. "Mama, is he going to die?" Lyra whispered, tears in her eyes. Soraya held her tight, whispering back, "No, child. He is strong. He will protect us." But inside, fear tore at her. The door burst open suddenly as one slaver broke through. His eyes wild, his blade raised. Soraya screamed. She pushed Lyra behind her and raised her arms, ready to sacrifice herself. But before the blade could fall, Daniel crashed into the man from behind, slamming him to the floor. With one swift strike, the threat was ended. Daniel's chest heaved, his arm bleeding, his face grim. "Stay back," he ordered. Then he turned and rushed outside again, where 2 more slavers circled. Their leader shouted with rage, "Kill him! Kill the fool!" The battle raged. Daniel's strength was pushed to the edge, but his will burned brighter than the fire in the hearth. Every time he faltered, he remembered the small voice of Lyra. Please, save my mom. He remembered Soraya's trembling hands, her broken dignity, and he fought harder. At last, the leader stood alone, his men groaning on the ground. His cruel grin had faded, his eyes burned with hate. You cannot protect them forever, he hissed. We will return. They will never be safe with you. Daniel stepped forward, his blade pressed against the man's throat, his voice like iron. Then let this be your warning. If you ever come near them again, it will be the last mistake you make. The leader spat to the ground but backed away, melting into the darkness with the last of his strength. Silence returned to the forest, broken only by Daniel's heavy breathing. He lowered his blade slowly and staggered, his body bloodied but his eyes still sharp. He turned back to the house, where Soraya stood in the doorway with Lyra clutched in her arms. She ran to him, her hands reaching to steady his body. Tears streamed down her face. Why risk your life like this for us? She cried. Daniel met her gaze, his voice weak but unshaken. Because you are not slaves anymore, because you are under my protection, and I will never let them take you. In that moment, Soraya's heart broke open. All her doubts, all her fears cracked. She saw him not just as the man who bought them, not just as a protector, but as something more, someone who chose to fight, not because he had to, but because he cared. She whispered, her voice trembling. You are not just a stranger to us anymore. Lyra clung to Daniel's hand, her small voice soft but certain. You're family now. Daniel looked at them both, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. And for the first time in years, Soraya felt the chains of fear weaken. Spark of hope lit inside her heart. But she knew deep down, the danger was not over. The slavers would not give up so easily. The real test of survival was yet to come. The house was quiet after the battle. The floor still bore marks of muddy boots. The air still smelled of smoke and iron. Daniel sat near the fire, his arm wrapped with a cloth where blood had soaked through. Soraya knelt beside him, her hands gentle as she tightened the bandage. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but her voice was steady. You should rest. Daniel shook his head slightly. I will rest later. For now, I need to stay awake in case they return. His voice was calm, though his body was exhausted. Lyra sat on the floor nearby, her little hands gripping a blanket. She watched Daniel with wide eyes. Will they come back? She whispered. Daniel looked at her, his gaze softening. Maybe, but if they do, they will find me here, and I will not let them touch you. Soraya's heart twisted at his words. She wanted to protest, to tell him he had already done enough. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something unshakable, a strength that gave her courage too. Days passed, and the slavers did not return. Perhaps they had been too wounded, or perhaps the warning in Daniel's blade had been enough. The village, however, was restless. Neighbors whispered more loudly now. Why does the human protect them? They will bring nothing but ruin. Some even demanded Daniel cast them out. One evening, Soraya heard angry voices outside the house. A group of men stood at the fence. Daniel, choose your own kind or them. One shouted, if you keep them, you will not be welcome here anymore. Daniel stepped outside, his face calm but firm. Then I choose them, he said without hesitation, his voice cut through the noise like steel. The men stared at him in shock, anger flashing in their eyes. But Daniel did not waver. If you cannot accept them, then you cannot accept me either. Inside the house, Soraya heard his words and covered her mouth. Tears spilled from her eyes. No one had ever chosen her before. No one had ever stood for her with such certainty. That night, after the men left in silence, Soraya sat by the fire with Daniel. Her voice trembled as she whispered, Why? Why? Do you do this for us? You risk your home, your life, your place among your own people? Why? Daniel looked into the fire. His answer was simple but carried weight. Because family is not blood. It is who we choose to protect. It is who we stand with, no matter the cost. Soraya's heart ached. Her hands covered her face. She sobbed softly, years of pain breaking free. She whispered through her tears, "Then, let us be family, if you will have us." Daniel turned to her, his eyes steady. He nodded once. "I already do." Lyra ran forward, hugging them both. "We are a family now," she said, her small voice full of joy. Her laughter filled the room, chasing away the shadows of fear. From that day on, something changed in the house. Soraya no longer sat with doubt in her eyes. She began to smile more, to laugh softly when Lyra played. She cooked meals not out of fear but out of love. Daniel worked harder than ever, his strength now fueled not just by duty but by belonging. The villagers continued to whisper. Some turned their backs on him. Others shook their heads in disbelief, but Daniel did not care. He had made his choice, and that choice gave him peace. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Soraya stood outside the house. She looked at Daniel chopping wood, sweat on his brow, strength in his arms. She looked at Lyra laughing as she carried small sticks to the pile. For the first time in years, Soraya felt safe. She felt like she belonged. She whispered softly to herself, "We were cast aside, unwanted, forgotten. But now, we are family." Daniel set down the axe and looked at her. Their eyes met, and in that silent moment, no words were needed. The truth was clear. They were no longer strangers bound by chance. They were bound by choice, by sacrifice, by love. That night, Soraya tucked Lyra into bed and sat quietly by the fire with Daniel. She spoke softly. "You gave us back more than freedom. You gave us back life, hope, and a place to belong. I will never forget that." Daniel nodded, his voice calm but warm. "And you gave me something too, a reason to fight, a reason to live beyond myself." The fire crackled. The night outside was still. Inside that small stone house, 3 lives once broken by cruelty were now tied together by something stronger than blood. And so the alien widow, once abandoned and mocked, found her place not in the hands of her own kind, but in the heart of a human who chose her. Together, they were no longer alone. They were family,